right, let's get started. I have the privilege to, let me back up. My name is Devin Torres. I am obviously not Louise Maba. I am a light-skinned biracial Black woman. I have natural curly hair and a bun, and I'm wearing Black glasses. My pronouns are she, her. And today I get to introduce Leah Chang's session. Leah is a Canadian-based instructional designer, educator, educational technologist, and accessibility for online learning consultant. She is the proud founder of LCL, Leah Chang Learning, a consultant group that works primarily with nonprofit organizations. She and her team have designed for Inclusion Canada, Autism Canada, Connects Autism Network, Accessible Employers of BC, IDI USA, which is Intercultural Development Inventory. And today we are going to hear from her on Partner with Neurodiverse Testers for Better Design. I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from screen, and Leah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Devin. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me, see me, everything's working. If not, please let me know. I can see the chat. I see thumbs up. That's great. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to start off just by giving a territorial acknowledgement. I live in and around Vancouver, British Columbia, and I want to acknowledge that that is on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I would encourage anyone today, when you're introducing yourself, to also acknowledge any of the Indigenous people or lands that you're connected with. And I just want to say a huge thanks to Lewis. I know, Devin, thanks for your introduction. I just want to say, Lewis, if you're in the background, thank you so much for all the work you do. This is a fantastic opportunity, very selfishly for me, my team, to learn from other greats. And I've just really enjoyed all the sessions this week. I also want to say a huge thank you to this community. It's a wonder that we're all learning and growing together. This is not a space that any one of us knows everything about, and so we are much stronger together. And so I'm just all happy and warm and fuzzy. So thanks very much for the past presenters and the future ones this week. I've really enjoyed your sessions and taking a lot of learning back to our team. So here are some dorky pictures of me as a kid. Just want to describe myself. I'm a former educator, so I started teaching in French immersion, if you're familiar with that program. And I had very dorky glasses when I was young. Right now, I don't wear glasses anymore, but I'm a half Chinese woman, middle age. I'm wearing a white shirt with black stripes, and I have sort of chin-length hair. For those who know me, I go through a lot of hair changes just because I like the variety of it. And I just want to start off today with a disclaimer. I am by no means a psychologist, an expert on neurodiverse populations, learning disability, intellectual disability. I can only share what I've been learning and what my team has been learning along the way. So just wanted to mention that, I'm by no means the expert, and I would like to just share what we can help pass on to others. So I'm going to talk a lot about my team, and that this is most of our LCL team. We're based in and around Vancouver, BC in Canada, but actually most of us are all working remotely. We enjoy working with clients that we choose to work with, which means we've all come probably from corporate backgrounds and have decided to be consultants. And we really enjoy choosing projects that are difficult in the sense that we like a challenge and we want to try to stretch our goals and learn new things. And the space that we realized is a unique opportunity for all of this is to support clients and projects with optimizing the learning and the content for people who are neurodiverse. So I'm going to talk about neurodiverse communities today in the broader sense. And what I'm going to do is just share what we used to do versus what we know better now and what we do now. And we'll probably continue changing and growing. So if you have any suggestions, please throw them in the chat, email me afterwards. I really like the sense of the pursuit of inquiry and curiosity and learning in this group. And I really just want to shout out to the other presenters who are all talking about, we didn't know what we were doing before, but we know much better now. And so we're going to share some of the models that we've used with great success. And in particular, I'm going to share 3 stories today. So I'm going to take you on a tour of some of the projects we've done. And at the end, I'm going to ask for everyone to help me gather the takeaways. Okay, great. So the 3 stories I'm going to share today, oh, looks like one of my images didn't pop up. I'm going to talk about the inclusive workplace. It was a project that we did with Inclusion Canada and Autism Canada. The second one is Employment Works. It was a project funded by the Simi Family Foundation, which supports autistic adults or adults on the autism spectrum with getting ready for employment and career progress. And the last one is some of the courses we've designed with the President's Group, the Accessible Employers of British Columbia. So this is the big question I want us to consider today. And it's a very complex one, because when we're designing to optimize learning for neurodiverse people and for neurodiverse learners, so that means, probably 21 to 29% of any of our learner populations, right? We're talking about people who are on the autism spectrum, who may have intellectual disabilities, who may have brain injuries or other sort of, they could be temporary or long-lasting. They're not always apparent disability, and often the needs of other individuals, for example, people with anxiety or ADHD, they may actually have some contrasting needs. And so how do we accommodate and design and optimize an experience for all learners and for these neurodiverse learners? So it's a pretty complex question. I'm going to share some success stories of what we've found works for us and for the projects we've worked on. So I'm going to ask you to engage with me a little bit. So get your texting and your typing fingers ready. I'm going to ask you to look at the tried and true instructional design model. So I'll show you a picture of ADDIE, the ADDIE learning cycle. And I'm going to ask, if you could put in the chat, when do you normally engage with neurodiverse self-advocates? So you'll notice I'm using the word self-advocates instead of testers, and I'll talk about that in a second. But in the W3 WCAG standards, it's actually one of the many standards which just says test with real users. Okay, so I think most of us have embraced that. But the question is, when do you do that? When it says focus groups, usability tests, the design and research team, these are pretty vague and kind of sort of ambiguous guidelines in terms of, yes, I want to test with real users. I want to engage with people who are neurodiverse and have cognitive and other content needs. But when do you do that? So I'm going to show an image of the instructional design cycle. So everyone is probably very familiar with ADDIE. So some other words that we use in our team for ADDIE are in the analysis phase, it's our discovery and our confirmation of the plan. How are we going to design? What are we designing to? What's the content? What are the objectives? All that good stuff. It's the learning needs analysis. And then we go into design. So that's when we're scripting and storyboarding. Next is development, our production and build. And of course, then we get to deliver it. So implement it into usually an LMS or any other system. And then lastly, most importantly, is the measurement and the iteration or evaluation stage. So I'm totally curious. I'm going to pause here for a second. When is it ideal to engage with neurodiverse testers? So we know that we're writing for, at least 1 in 5 of our audience members are going to be neurodiverse or have neurodiverse needs, and we want to support their learning. So how do we do that in what stage in the project? Great, so I'm seeing at the start, awesome, I'm seeing analysis. Oh, I love it, throughout. Yes, every stage of the process and ongoing, every stage. Yes, and some people are specifically mentioning through ADD. So analysis, design, development, especially. Yeah, great. Okay, so I love that we're thinking about, yes, the concept, we know we want to do it. we know that there's lots to learn by working with self-advocates, and it's that whole nothing about us without us. So let's actually look at another way to see this. I want to introduce you to something we use quite a bit in the health sciences or any professional development that our team has worked on with Canadian health authorities. So this is something called the levels of community engagement. It's sort of a tried and true method that many researcher groups and sort of patient advocate groups in the medical sciences uses to engage with people of the community. So what you're seeing here is a little diagram. It's taken from the Canadian science publication. And it's showing that there is sort of a progression of how we can engage with people in community. So for example, we can start with informing them, which is really just saying, hey, here's what's happening, FYI. We can go a little further than that, and we can consult. And consulting is, asking for feedback, giving them some options, asking them for their opinion. And this is actually already a very important step. So most of us, feel free to pop your hand up or put in the chat. I'd just like to see who's already consulting with neurodiverse self-advocates. If you are asking them for their feedback, opinions, checking in with them at any stage, then we're already doing this. And most projects probably have some consultation, right? Which is great. I'd like to encourage us to think beyond this and go a little deeper and broader. So the levels of community engagement then shift us to involving. Okay, so when we involve people in the community, we say something like, okay, here's the problem that we're trying to fix. What ideas do you have? So again, those of you who said, back in the early stages, at the start of the project, when we're in the analysis phase, the content gathering phase, this is when we can start involving others. But let's go even further. The next step would be to collaborate. And another word, for many of us who work with Indigenous groups is allyship or partnership. So it's collaborating with, alongside, together. So instead of saying, hey, we're working on this problem, FYI, we're now saying, let's work together to solve this problem, and walk together alongside, create the plan, work on those next steps. And then the ultimate goal is to empower. So empowering is where, we are almost supporting more in the background. We can say things like, hey, you care about this issue. I can see you're leading this initiative. How and where can we support or help you? And so it's really letting them guide and lead the way. So in the stories that I'm sharing today, I'm going to just sort of share how our team tried to collaborate and empower more than just inform and consulting. And I'd love your feedback. We've been learning so much as we go over the years, so I'm sure we will continue. All right, let's do one more quick activity. I want to know, first of all, I hope you're familiar with FOR. So it's the acronym to help us remember what the principles of universal and accessible design are. And I use this a lot. We talk about it on our teams or with our clients, but it's really helpful for me to go back to the actual source of the definition of what these terms mean. And I would invite you to do the same. So to go back to the W3 site that describes these guidelines, and it's a really good reminder to not just say, yeah, okay, is it perceivable, operable, understandable, robust, but to remember for neurodiverse communities, perceivable is also what's experienced, operable is also, has to make sense in the sense that is it going to work from beginning to end? And understandable is not just plain language, and that's super important, but also is it predictable? And sometimes I find in instructional design, personally, we want to change things up and vary them. And sometimes that's actually not what the user or the learner needs the most. They are, their main focus is to understand and to embrace and experience what they're trying to learn, so the actual content. Any extra energy spent on trying to make sense of how to get through the course experience itself is probably not necessary and can be overwhelming, right? So that's really something that I wanted to just remind myself and maybe all of you. Sometimes understandable is also predictable, and that's okay, right? And lastly, this is a big one. I love to design curriculum and learning experiences, but I also love to support groups with the technology to deliver and support. So can I just see a show of hands or some love? Any learning technologists out there? I mean, I'm surprised because if you had told me 10 years ago that I would end up like loving to work with LMSs and learning platforms and learning record systems, I would have completely giggled and laughed and scoffed at that. But now I can really see how much an opportunity it is. So I'll talk a bit about that today. But when I say something needs to be robust for neurodiverse learners, it also means, does everything fit together in terms of their online learning experience? The course or experience itself could be super accessible, but if the registration process to get into it or the website is a barrier, then we're not actually achieving something that is accessible. So I would encourage you to think of robust, which is probably the most ambiguous and hardest to sort of quantify and qualify in the POOR acronym. I would help you I would encourage you to think about it in terms of how do all of our technical systems work together. So let's look at some examples. And essentially our journey started with, and I use this term in my title too, although I shouldn't have. We used to call them accessibility testers. Now what we realize is these are important advocates that are not only contributing to the strategy and the content of a learning experience, but we also want them to be self-advocates and to lobby and lead any projects. So we're really, with our own language, trying to embrace that concept. So the default is now that we call for accessibility consultants and self-advocates as part of our project team from the very beginning. We make sure that they are paid, whether that be through our project billables or through our clients' budget themselves. But either way, their work needs to be respected and valued as professional consultants. The other thing that we've stopped doing and that we do now as a default is we used to only send out, we call it build one, which is our first phase of development or production. So this is almost after all of the content has been set, and now we're getting into developing it either in storyline or particulate rise or in the LMS. And we realize that's too late. So going back to our ADDIE cycle, those of you who said, start in the beginning, start in the analysis, that's really key, right? There are some challenges to sending a storyboard or draft to neurodiverse self-advocates. So you've got to do that intentionally and carefully, right? And we used to expect our clients to take on the responsibility and accountability of engaging with community members. We realize that that's not setting anyone up for success. So what we do now, and we're a consulting group, so when we propose, pitch, and share out our project approach, we always include time, effort, and space in our projects to include universal design, to engage with and pay for consultants to be participating throughout the project. So we would like them to be part of our project team from the very beginning. All right, one more slide here. So just keep in mind these phases of an accessible design project. When I talk to my clients or when we start working with a new project group, we always talk about how important it is to think of all of these building blocks that will create a great experience. And And this is where those learning technologists can also play a really big role. So you'll notice that number 5, the top of the pyramid here, is actually the LMS publishing. So making sure that the content, the design, the development itself, but also how are we publishing and delivering it. These are really key. And I'm just going to ask if there's any project managers out there today. I hope that as learning design professionals, you really lean on project managers. I love the team that I work with because we, at the base, for number 1, the very first step is we need to make sure accessibility is built into the project scope from the very beginning. So we always talk to our clients about, what level of accessibility, is there anything that we need to know about the audience in particular? We make sure that the budget and the scope have room for us to embrace partnering and collaborating with accessibility self-advocates from the beginning. Great. So here's our first example, and you'll have to bear with me as I shift to a couple of websites. So if you can't see what I'm talking about, let me know, and I'll make sure everyone can see it. But I'm going to visit a website which is in English and French. It's Canadian, but it's public and free for use for anybody. So I would invite you to really lean on these resources. And what you're going to see is that not only were accessibility advocates and people with disability the target audience and the primary audience of the website or the resource hub, but they were also part of the project from the very beginning. So if they are featured in videos, they tell their own stories, they participate as some examples and in the role plays and videos that we have. The other thing is that we really rethought some of our publishing. You're going to notice that we intentionally did not publish all of our learning interactions to a learning management system. Some of our micro-learning is right on the website, and we felt that that was a more robust and more operable way to encourage more users to look at the resources. So I'm going to navigate there now. Let's see if that works. Bear with me 2 seconds. While I'm pulling this up, feel free to throw any questions in there. And I'm going to try sharing the whole window, so bear with me for a second. Okay, so can you see the homepage of the Inclusive Workplace? Yes, awesome, great. Okay, so let's take a little tour. So this was a government-funded federal project, which means it's bilingual. So you're going to notice some Canadian spelling. And it was funded during the pandemic to support people and adults specifically on the autism spectrum or those with intellectual disability to seek employment and to maintain gainful and meaningful employment, especially during the pandemic. So this was a group that was disproportionately affected during the first waves and still today. So a couple things you'll notice. First one is there's this sort of sensory muting button, if you like, and that was done very intentionally because many of our users on the spectrum may find the sensory overload a little bit distracting. So a lot of our users do choose to sort of mute the colors. The other thing is some of these videos you'll notice that are self-advocate facing also have a more sort of saturated tone of colors. And the level of language that we chose was grade 4, and that's because we were mostly targeting people on the autism spectrum and people with intellectual disability. So, for example, we have some self-advocates with Down syndrome and some other intellectual and cognitive disabilities. So I'm going to navigate to one of the pages. Here's a page on universal design. It's part of a blog article, as well as you see this, looks like a video. It's actually a little micro-learning interaction. We designed this in Storyline, and not only does it talk about universal design, but it also is designed for people on the spectrum, employers, and businesses, so enterprises that hire or that would be prospective employers, right? So a couple things that we notice here are level of language, very specific examples. We've got some videos as well that include subtitles, and we have some light interactions here. I encourage you to visit this later. It's a cute little story about someone planning a dinner party and trying to accommodate for everybody and to choose a menu that everybody would enjoy and eat, which is a great analogy for universal design, right? The other thing is that this interaction is not hidden behind an LMS, so we call this an ungated interaction. The idea is that learning, micro-learning like this, can be published right to your website, and in some cases we found that the self-advocates preferred this. It made it quicker, faster, more salient and relevant at the time of need, and so it's that just-in-time learning that we were trying out. That said, there were also some courses that we developed, and again, you'll notice that the e-learning, not only is it open and available to everyone, but you're going to see a slight difference with the courses that are directed for self-advocates. So you notice again those muted colors versus those that are more suitable for employment agencies and for businesses. But anyone can take these courses and the learning. The idea here is that there's no segmentation, that the choice for learners to choose their own adventure is really important. So I'm just going to go back to our slides here. It's great. All right. So not only did we design for people with intellectual disability and people on the spectrum, but we design with them. This is the biggest takeaway. You can see that they are in the videos, they are sharing their own stories, and we learned so much with this first project. The one thing I would do differently is I would work with them on our project team sooner rather than a little bit later in the project. Okay, and so the takeaway here is build in people's living experience from the beginning, build in time to collaborate with them, and the biggest takeaway was that we were able to fix things that normally would show up as glitches or barriers or like big problems to troubleshoot in the build phase. We were able to mitigate those in the earlier phases. So don't be shy to reach out during the design and work with self-advocates when you're drafting storyboards and scripts. Essentially, you have to go beyond feedback, right? We're working with people from their perspective alongside their perspective. And yes, the previous slide. Okay, thanks. So the previous slide was showing just some examples of the videos and how we, I pressed too fast, and how we intentionally used some of the design features to limit sensory overload. So for example, the saturation of colors was sort of muted, and we limited fast-paced editing. We always included closed captions, and we usually include video transcript too. What we really found interesting in the next project, I'll talk about this, is that people on the spectrum are the people we were working with really preferred to have people talking, so those talking head videos, which normally we would try to avoid. I know instructional designers are always sort of trying to find the most engaging ways, but and so talking head videos tend not to be in sort of our current design guidelines. But something that surprised us was really the fact that people on the spectrum prefer to have the face, the voice, and the closed captions all together. So that was a takeaway that we've been learning over the years as well. Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk about another project. This one is, you can visit the website. Again, it was in French and English. And this one, although is not publicly available, there are some publicly available examples. So I'm going to navigate there. I just want to make sure you can see that. We're on the Employment Works website. Employment Works is a really cool program that's government funded. It supports adults on the autism spectrum who are getting prepared for employment or who want to achieve more success. They could be candidates, they could be already employed, or they could be looking for career opportunities and growth. The idea is that the government funds I believe it's a 6-week program, and at the time during the pandemic, they were only offering in person and then shifted to virtual. So as you can imagine, Canada being a very large country with lots of rural and remote communities as well, offering only sessions in person was not a very accessible way and couldn't reach a wide audience. Even shifting to virtual was providing more options, but was still providing some barriers. And so this group, funded by the Sine Family Foundation, got funding to deliver an online version, so a fully self-directed e-learning asynchronous. And of course, that's where our group came in. Holy smokes, we learned so much from this project. I'm just going to show you the difference. So the in-person and the virtual obviously was great for many individuals who learned better in that environment, were able to attend during the time and the place that the sessions were held, and they could choose to participate that way. One of the things that we realized as we were designing the online program is that this format and the delivery method may not have been as robust and appropriate for everybody, right? So what we wanted to do is offer some framing, let's call it, an opportunity to also find out, hey, is this the right way to take this program? Is this the best fit for me? And to actually give them a course preview. So again, I'm showing, this is an Articulate Rise sort of introduction module. We published it purposefully right onto the website. And yes, we can still track through some Google Analytics and conversion goals. So it's not that there's no tracking at all, but we wanted people a chance to see what the program was like, to experience it. And again, it's giving them all of those perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust opportunities to see if this is the right format for them and the right experience for them in their learning journey. So, you'll also notice that the content is very much about preparing them for e-learning success and describing what to expect, who the course is for, that kind of thing. You can see here that we sort of custom built a progress bar. This is something that I was quite surprised by, but when I go back to looking at the accessibility guidelines, remembering that understandable and predictable are important. And sometimes I forget that predictable is actually a necessary thing, especially for learners on the spectrum. So don't be shy to sort of have repetition, to repeat concept blocks, to use color very intentionally, and of course, you have to design for your audience, right? Thanks so much, Daphne. Appreciate it. So that's an example, and again, this is part of a conversation we had with our clients, not just to design a great online learning experience, but we also, worked with our clients to make sure that the way it was published in the LMS was operable and perceivable and all of those good things. That robustness, it has to work from beginning to end, and that starts here in the investigation and in the sign-up phase. So that whole registration process is part of that experience. So don't forget that when you're designing for learning. Wherever you can and wherever you have the power to, start embracing and planting those seeds about, hey, the learning experience starts before the course starts. How are we making sure that everything fits together? Is it indeed robust? Okay, so that's the second example. And like I was saying, we worked with a really amazing group of self-advocates throughout the project, and this was a little new for us. We sent them both our storyboards as well as the build, so the first sort of draft of our production. And it was really interesting. We were sort of surprised, but one thing that we heard from this group is that they wanted choice in terms of the videos and interactions. They wanted to see both transcripts and closed captions. We had some people who read really fast, and they would prefer to actually speed read through a transcript instead of watching a video. We had others who wanted to watch a video, but they wanted the audio, the face, and not just an animated concept or narration video. And so this is an interesting takeaway, that the group we worked with preferred talking heads. And that's normally something we try to avoid. So again, this is an example of designing for the learner. We used progress bars, and then our LMS was indeed part of that whole testing phase. And LMS in this case was also the registration platform. So definitely want to use all of those things. And Kara has a really good point here. Using something like Handbrake to make the size smaller. Yes, there's all sorts. So I haven't been following the chat, but I'm seeing lots of great comments in here. So I'll have a quick look afterwards. Thanks. Okay, I'd like to show you one last example, and this is with a group called the President's Group, which is the presidents of Accessible Employers of BC. So I'll show you their website and explain what they do. They're a really interesting nonprofit organization. And I'm going to walk through a couple course examples, but the President's Group offers 4 free courses to any business in British Columbia who has committed to improving accessibility in the workplace. So basically everyone. And these are really great examples of our team is starting to empower, collaborate with people on the spectrum, with people with ADHD, with self-advocates from the very beginning. In fact, they are our main subject matter experts for these courses. And wow, has it changed how we work? So I'll show you a couple examples of that. And just to reiterate, we are not just working with self-advocates in our content phases and prototyping and build. We've worked with them from the very beginning and partnered with them. So this was a really great example of the learning curve that our team has taken. So here's the Accessible Employers website. I invite you to visit it. It's, again, a great example of our online journey in British Columbia to improve the level of web accessibility. So in some parts of Canada, we're a little bit behind maybe in the States in terms of showing examples of web accessibility. So you can imagine where accessible online learning is. We're even a little bit behind there too, but thankfully we're learning from great groups like this, and we're starting to hold ourselves more accountable. So if you go to their online courses, you're going to see that they have made these courses free, and they are addressed and designed for employers, business leads, HR managers, supervisors, and we wrote the content and designed with self-advocates as subject matter experts from the very beginning. So especially the course called Support Self-Disclosure. So this course is all about how to build a safe space in your workplace so that people feel supported and accepted, and where they feel comfortable disclosing any disabilities. And again, those non-apparent disabilities, intellectual disabilities, are challenging because we are still learning so much about them, and I think the level of awareness has been raised recently, which is great. And yes, thank you very much. Thanks for sharing. So one of the courses that we wrote, Lead Culture Change, we worked closely with a self-advocate, a woman who recently became a consulting sort of entity for people on the spectrum and was recently diagnosed. So one of the things we learned over the years working with these groups is that women in particular are usually underdiagnosed for being on the spectrum, and often if they are diagnosed, they're diagnosed very, very much later in life. And so it was really fascinating to work with our subject matter expert and to get that first person's experience from the beginning. So these courses are not freely available to people outside of British Columbia, but if you're in BC, they are free and available. So again, it's that robustness. It's, you know, not only writing great content, bringing in the right people to design a course experience, but also how are you delivering it? How can people access that? So those are the examples I wanted to show. I wish I had more time to spend, but I really want to hear more from this group. So I'd love to hear some questions. I'm going to take a second to go back through the chat as well. And again, these are just stories of what our team has been learning and how, you know, how we've been progressing in our journey. We have a long way to go still, but we're really enjoying working with self-advocate nonprofit groups, community groups, and let's just keep sharing our lessons learned with each other. Yeah. So let's have a look at some of our questions. If you haven't popped one in yet, feel free. And maybe if Devin's there, you can also help me identify any of the chat questions. So I see one here from Jessica George. The question is, how do you find your consultant self-advocates? Do you search for consultancies with neurodiverse testers, learners, and SPEs? Yeah, fantastic question. So there are a couple, first of all, there's a couple of groups in Canada I highly recommend. I can't speak for all of the American agencies, but I know that there are some great ones. So one that we have used before is called Fable. Fable is a consulting group. You can hire them online, and you can you know, to tap into a pool of very skilled, very diverse self-advocate testers. We've had the benefit of working with nonprofits who already have their own communities and consultants to engage with. I also have been developing sort of our own community of consultants. For example, in our local community, we work with a person who uses JAWS as a screen reader, so she's blind, and we work with another consultant who uses a sip and puff cursor, and she helps us test all of our navigation and content. And we work primarily offline with them, so we work asynchronously, and we work, you know, we bring them in on projects. So it really depends. I think if you have the advantage of working with people in the local community of your project or your group, or if you're consulting with your clients, I would always start there. But there are some amazing consultancies and online sort of groups that you can engage. And then in Canada, we recommend Fable. So I hope that answers your question, Jessica. And we had another couple of questions. Yes. Given the abilities of generative AI and new age technology, how can we adopt AI in accessibility training? Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to answer this question, which can be taken in many different ways, relevant to neurodiverse learners. So we absolutely advocate for using AI with caution. And a lot of our people on the spectrum or neurodiverse learners are actually in very highly technical positions in the workplace. So they may actually be writing the code for some of this generative AI. And so I think, first of all, being very transparent about it, saying when, where, how, and why we used it for generating content, and also pointing out what to be careful with. So supporting people with intellectual disability and sort of discerning what is vetable and what is reputable information and what is accurate can be really important. So for example, having been an educator in the past, when I would work with students who had learning disabilities and we were talking about the use of AI or any technology or tools, we would also caution how to use it carefully. So I know that's a really broad answer, but I'm just trying to link the question really to the content. I hope that helps. I welcome anyone else who had any comments on using AI relative to designing for neurodiverse learners. Awesome. Yeah, someone is saying that many clients on the spectrum do work in IT. They're programmers, developers, so they're working intimately with some of this new technology. I'm going to just point out Dawn's comment here. So Dawn's saying, I find a big help is tightening and simplifying language. Yeah, removing turns of phrases, unclear language, colloquialisms, etc. Yes. I have learned so much about rewriting, and I was listening to our panel yesterday. One of the speakers, I believe it was Cindy, was mentioning that they challenge themselves to cut 50% of their content. So if they're writing course experience, cut 50%. Concision, clarity, these are really important things. And what you're talking about is promoting plain language, which is, you can actually get a certificate in plain language, and some of our clients have actually been champions of this certificate. But there's so much to learn there. Like at the basics, avoiding things like popular references, idioms, even jokes. These are not necessarily things that make our learning clear and concise. Yeah, great comment. Thank you. So I'm just going to check the Q&A here. So Devin, we did have one question. I'm just going to read it out. Or maybe, is there a way for you to show it?
Yep, I gotcha.
Okay. I'll read it in the meantime. How do you guide clients in evaluating the accessibility of their learning experiences? Oh, great question. Well, it depends on the level of readiness and awareness of the client, and activate their prior knowledge, right? So the first step is when I'm talking to them, if they've come to me and asking for a certain project, I bring it up right away in that first intake call or the first Q&A that we do, which is, do you have any thoughts on what you need for accessibility? Are you aware of what's required for accessibility? Although we want to make sure that they are complying with any laws, that's not really the right reason. The right reason is because 1 in 5 of their audience members are going to be neurodiverse, no matter what industry or situation we're in, right? So my first questions are, how will we be delivering this? What technology do you have to support? Do you have any self-advocates that we can engage with from the beginning? Have you had any past projects and experiences that have been successful in terms of increasing the level of accessibility? And if so, tell us more. You probably hear the trains in the background. Where I live in New Westminster, just outside of Vancouver, is very train friendly. So you hear a couple toots, they're just encouraging us as our discussion goes on. So I hope I answered your question, Megan. Welcome anyone else to share how they. Let's go on mute for a second. Oh, that's fun. Okay. I'd welcome anyone else in the chat to just share how do you guide clients through accessibility. At the very thanks, Cindy. Love the trade. At the very sort of simplest and first steps, I would say plan to have at least 1 to 2 rounds of feedback. Think of that community engagement model, and if your client is new to this concept or is new to embracing working with accessibility consultants, then at least get into the inform and the consult stages, right? So I find that model, and there's lots of images, you can search it on the internet. That model is really helpful to show the progression and sort of the journey that you can take with your clients and help them grow into. It is a bit, it's challenging to jump right into the collaborate and empower right off the bat. So, it's totally fine to start with the early stages of informing, consulting, and those are healthy ways to get started. Thanks. Yeah, if you like trains, this is a great place to be. Dawn was asking about the certification. I'm going to try and pull that up, but that's a great question. So this is the plain language certificate. In fact, one of the employees of the President's Group alerted us to this. So I'll have to look up the exact link, and I'll send that to you, Dawn, after the fact. Thank you. I believe it's Canadian-based, but there are some in the States as well, and they're all great. Definitely something we should all be getting better at. And, even having worked as a digital marketing consultant in the past, and that I thought I was a good writer before that. I have degrees and was a published teacher and that kind of thing. But man, working in marketing, that really helped me hone my message. So we can take a cue from web copywriters to really write clearly and be clear with those call to actions, all of those good things. So I'll have to find that for you, Doc. Thanks. Fantastic. Are there any other questions that I missed? And feel free to sort of resurface them, or I'm just going back through the chat here. Wow. Okay. So one last sort of word of encouragement I would leave with you is really embrace the learning technology side of things too. So a lot of us are really focused on creating a fantastic learning experience in the content or the platform itself. But beyond that, how is the user or the learner going to get into that, go through it, and then also complete that experience? What happens after the experience? So there's a lot of opportunity there to make sure that the technical systems are robust and that they work together. And so just want to put a little word of encouragement to embrace the accessibility of learning technology as well as the design in terms of the course experience. Thanks so much for having me. This has been quite a pleasure. I hope I shared some useful examples today.
Leah, thank you so much. This whole presentation has been super helpful, and I love that you touched on the learning technology piece. I work on an assessment platform myself, and so 90% of the time it's, hey, are users having a good experience? Can they access the assessment? How are we going to evaluate effectively if they can't even access the basics? So thank you for sharing that. One more reminder that Rebecca Prejean's session is canceled, but we still have Alan coming up at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern time. And yeah, any more questions, thoughts? I think we're good. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Leah.
Appreciate the opportunity. Bye.
Bye.